On my 65th birthday, my son left me a note to eat something simple, then went out to celebrate my daughter-in-law's mother early, like royalty. So I stopped waiting to be remembered. I bought a lake house in cash, posted one photo, and gave them 30 days to learn the difference between family and freeloading. The key turned silently in the lock of my Chicago condo. It was my 65th birthday, a Tuesday. I wasn't expecting any grand gestures, but the silence that greeted me had a particular sting to it. On the kitchen island lay a hurried scrawl from my son, Brandon. Out with Chloe at her mom's. Be back late. Grab something for yourself. No happy birthday. No card, not even a grocery store cupcake. I set my bag down and surveyed the kitchen. Since Brandon and Chloe moved in 6 months ago to save for a down payment, the space had been colonized. Chloe's modern minimalist vases were everywhere, and my vintage copper cookware, the pieces I actually used, had been banished to the basement. I put the kettle on, pulled a dry slice of marble cake from the pantry, and lit a single candle for myself. The flame flickered in the twilight. My phone buzzed. An Instagram notification Chloe had posted. She was beaming at the camera next to her mother, who was draped in a brand new diamond-encrusted necklace. Early birthday celebrations for Mom. Only the best for the Queen. The caption read. In the background, Brandon was popping a bottle of expensive champagne. A familiar ache tightened my chest, but I didn't cry. I just watched. For months, I'd been footing the grocery bills, doing their laundry, and enduring Chloe's condescending remarks about my outdated taste. "Beverly, you don't get it, this is the aesthetic now," she'd say while rearranging my belongings. I took a sip of tea and felt a sudden cold clarity. When you're pushed into the background, you actually get the best view of the whole picture. I grabbed my tablet and logged into my brokerage account. The interest and dividends from my late husband's estate were substantial. Brandon assumed I was scraping by on a modest Social Security check. He was wrong. I wasn't looking for pity. I was looking for a getaway. An ad caught my eye immediately: a cedar-shingled cottage on Lake Geneva, private dock, total seclusion. "Happy birthday, Beverly," I whispered to the empty room. I pinched out the candle with my fingers. The plan was set before the front door swung open and Brandon and Chloe stumbled in, laughing, never even glancing my way. The next morning, Chloe was already at the breakfast bar, tapping away at her phone. "Hey, Bev, we're gonna need the living room this weekend for a planning dinner. My mom is doing her real birthday party, and we're hosting the caterers. You should probably stay upstairs or maybe go see a movie so we have the space." It wasn't a request. It was an eviction notice. I set my coffee mug down. Usually I would have nodded and offered to help prep the appetizers. "No," I said quietly. Chloe froze her eyes, still glued to her screen. "What do you mean, no?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I'll be using the living room myself. I've invited some friends over." It was a lie, but a necessary one. Brandon wandered into the kitchen, bleary-eyed. "Come on, Mom, don't be like that. This is a big deal for Chloe's family." I didn't argue. Instead, I pulled out my planner and laid it on the counter. Starting today, we're having a schedule for the common areas. Also, the household fund needs an adjustment. Inflation is hitting the utility bills and groceries hard. You two will need to contribute an extra $600 a month starting the 1st. Brandon choked on his orange juice. "But we're saving for a house." Chloe glared at me. "That's so unfair, Beverly." "We're family." I gave her a thin, polite smile. "Exactly. And family should know that nothing in this life is free." Without another word, I grabbed my keys. I had a 1:00 p.m. viewing at Lake Geneva. The drive took about 90 minutes. The house was perfect. The realtor looked stunned when I told him after 10 minutes, "I'll take it. All cash, no financing." He nodded with newfound respect. As I initiated the wire transfer for the earnest money right there on my phone, I felt a literal weight lift off my shoulders. When I got home, the atmosphere was frigid. Chloe had replaced my foyer flowers with her own again. I calmly took her vases, put them in a cardboard box, and slid it in front of her bedroom door. The lines were drawn. Now I just had to hold them. The evening passed in a state of performative silence. Brandon tried to smooth things over by taking out the trash, a chore he usually forgot. I sat in my armchair reading a book on lakeside gardening. I didn't need a fight. I just needed consistency. I could hear Chloe on the phone in the next room, her voice sharp. "She's getting erratic, Brandon. We need to handle this. Maybe the condo is just too much for her to manage at her age." I heard every word. They were actually entertaining the idea of painting me as confused to seize control of the property. It was a classic mistake. They underestimated my mental agility. Thursday morning, I made my first move. I changed the Wi-Fi password and the logins for the streaming services. When Chloe complained that her home office connection was down, I simply said, "A private line encourages independence. You guys want your own house, right? Consider this practice for managing your own utilities." Brandon came to my room that night. "Mom, Chloe's crying. Why are you being so heartless? Is this just about us missing your birthday?" He sounded like a pouting teenager. I looked at him, my expression neither angry nor sad. "It's not about one day, Brandon. It's about the last 6 months where I became an invisible maid in my own home." He started to offer a half-hearted apology, but I held up a hand. "Save it. Actions speak louder than words." I showed him the invoice for the increased monthly expenses. "I expect the cash by Monday. Otherwise, I'm locking the pantry when I'm not home. I'm done subsidizing lox and bagels for Chloe's mother while my own fridge gets raided." I slept better that night than I had in years. I was reclaiming my territory inch by inch. On Friday, I'd get the keys to the lake house. No one in this apartment had any idea that I already had 1 foot out the door. The roles had flipped. They were the ones begging for a seat at the table now. Friday morning in the city was overcast, but I felt like the sun was out. While Brandon and Chloe were at work, I began what I called the silent inventory. I didn't pack suitcases that would have been too obvious. Instead, I tucked my birth certificate, my jewelry, and the photo albums of Brandon's father into a nondescript plastic bin. I hauled the bin to the garage and stowed it in the trunk of my SUV. I didn't feel like a thief. I felt like a woman rescuing her treasures from a sinking ship. In the kitchen, I left a typed list of rules for the weekend. No guests in the living room. No using my high-capacity washer for Chloe's mother's dry clean-only linens. I drove to the lake. The realtor handed over the keys to the cottage. It smelled of pine needles and freedom. I sat on the dock and let my legs dangle over the water. There was no Chloe here to nitpick my decor, and no Brandon seeing me as a walking ATM. That afternoon, I went to a local boutique and bought a high-end mattress and a professional-grade espresso machine. I paid for it all with the bonus I'd given myself for my birthday. I kept my phone in my purse. I wanted to soak in the silence before the storm hit. When I returned to the city that evening, the condo was lit up like a Christmas tree. I heard voices that didn't belong. Despite my explicit instructions, Chloe's family was there. They were sitting at my dining table, eating off my china, and drinking the vintage Cabernet I'd been saving for a special occasion. I walked into the dining room. The conversation died instantly. Chloe's mother, draped in silk, raised a glass. "Oh, Beverly, don't be a killjoy. We just wanted to do a quick toast." I didn't say a word. I walked to the sideboard, took the wine bottle, and emptied the remainder into a potted plant. Then I looked at Brandon. "You have exactly 1 hour to get these people out of my house. After that, I'm calling the police for trespassing." Brandon tried to laugh, a nervous cracking sound. "Mom, you're being dramatic. We're just celebrating." I didn't look at him. I turned to the guests. "The deed to this home is in my name. If you aren't out in 10 minutes, I'm filing a report. My son seems to have forgotten what no means. Perhaps you'll understand it better." Chloe's mother huffed, indignant, but when she saw the look in my eyes, she started grabbing her handbag. "Come on, Chloe. Let's go somewhere. We're actually welcome," she hissed. Within minutes, the house was empty, except for Brandon and Chloe, who stared at me in shock. "That was humiliating, Mom. How could you do that to us in front of her parents?" Chloe screamed. Her face was blotchy and red. I remained calm. "The humiliation was your choice when you ignored my boundaries. This isn't a hotel, and I am not the staff." I went to the hallway and took the spare key Brandon kept on the hook. "I'll be taking this back." Brandon stammered. "But what if I lock myself out?" "Then you call a locksmith." "With your own money," I replied. That night, I locked my bedroom door from the inside. I could hear them whispering in the hall, a frantic, toxic hissing. They were probably plotting their revenge or their move out. Either was fine by me. The next morning, I posted my first photo to Facebook. It was a shot of me on the dock of the lake house, the water sparkling behind me. Caption: "My belated birthday gift to myself. Finally, some peace and quiet." The comments flooded in. My friends were ecstatic. Then came the text from Brandon. "What is this? Where are you? Did you rent that place? That's irresponsible. We need that money for our future." I read it and deleted it instantly. I started moving the things I didn't want to keep into the storage unit in the basement. I labeled everything with stickers: Brandon, Chloe, trash. It was a physical separation of my past from my future. I was ready for the final act. The weekend was a masterclass in toxic curiosity. Brandon followed me from room to room. "Mom, seriously, who owns that lake house? Did you rent it?" That had to cost a fortune. I ignored him and kept sorting my books. Chloe tried a more strategic approach. On Sunday night, she came to my room with 2 mugs of tea, a sudden change of heart that was as transparent as glass. "Beverly, we've been thinking. Maybe we've been a little selfish. The lake house looks incredible. Is that an investment for all of us? Like a weekend getaway spot." I didn't take the tea. "It's not an investment for you. It's my new home." Chloe paled. "Your home. What about this place? You can't just throw us out on the street." I snapped my book shut. "You said you were saving for your own house. Now you can go do that. I'm putting this condo on the rental market starting the 1st of the year. I've already found a lovely family with kids who'd appreciate the space." "You're letting strangers live in our home," Brandon shouted from the doorway. "It's my home, Brandon. Your father and I worked 30 years for it. You've lived here 6 months rent-free and treated it like an all-inclusive resort." I handed him an envelope. "This is your formal 30-day notice to vacate. Since you've been saving so hard, finding an apartment shouldn't be an issue." Chloe let out a hysterical laugh. "We didn't save any money. We spent it on the Aspen trip, my new SUV lease, and gifts for my mom." The truth was finally out. They had exploited my kindness and blown their cash while pretending to build a future. Then, I said, with a coldness that surprised even me, you'd better start prioritizing. My movers arrive in 2 weeks. I left them standing in the hall. The greed in their eyes had turned into pure, unadulterated panic. They thought they could bleed me dry until the end. They were just finding out that this old lady had claws. The following days turned the condo into a war zone, but I refused to engage. When Chloe screamed, I put on my noise-canceling headphones. When Brandon begged, I pointed at the calendar. I started having the big pieces picked up. The antique buffet in the dining room, the leather sectional, everything was heading to Lake Geneva. You're taking everything. What are we supposed to sit on? Chloe complained. Sit on your principles, I replied dryly. I made sure every utility, electricity, water, gas was scheduled to be transferred out of my name on the day I left. I wanted no financial ties left to bind us. One afternoon, I came home to find Brandon in my home office. He was rifling through my desk looking for the closing papers on the lake house. I stood in the doorway. He jumped. I wanted to make sure you didn't get scammed, Mom. The place was probably overpriced. I walked over and snatched the folder from his hand. Out. Now. My tone was so authoritative he left without a word. I changed the lock on my office door that evening. It was heartbreaking to see how far my own son had fallen, driven by a woman who only saw dollar signs. I invited my old friend Martha over to help me pack. We drank wine and laughed while Chloe stomped around upstairs. You're brave, Bev, Martha said. Most women would just swallow it for the sake of the kids. I'm done swallowing, I said. I'm living. Moving day approached. I'd hired a professional crew. I wanted no stress, no scenes. I gave Brandon and Chloe a list of the items they were allowed to keep: the old kitchen chairs and a wobbly dresser. Everything else was either coming with me or going to charity. The night before the move, I went through my phone and deleted all our recent family photos. I needed to make room for new memories. Pictures of sunrises over the water, without the shadow of ingratitude hanging over them. The moving truck pulled up at 8 a.m. sharp. Brandon and Chloe sat like 2 lumps of coal in the empty kitchen. I ignored their glares and coordinated the movers. Everything went according to plan. I'd organized my whole life. Why should today be any different? As the last box was loaded, I walked through the empty rooms one last time. Without my things, the place felt soulless and sterile. Chloe walked up to me. You're really doing this? You're leaving us in this dump. It's a $700,000 condo, Chloe. Hardly a dump. You have 30 days. Use them wisely, I said. I handed Brandon a folder with the basics: how to bleed the radiators when the trash goes out, and the number for the new property manager. As of now, I'm only reachable via email. My phone will be off for a while. Brandon finally seemed to realize I was actually leaving. Mom, please. Can't we just talk? We talked for years, Brandon. You just never listened. I gave him a quick peck on the cheek, a goodbye to the son I used to know. Then I got in my car. The drive to the lake was the most beautiful trip of my life. I stopped at a small bakery and bought a massive slice of Black Forest cake, extra whipped cream. No comments from Chloe about calories, no Brandon eating half of it. When I got to the lake house, the movers were just placing the final pieces. I set up my bedroom first. The blue linens matched the view of the water perfectly. I placed a photo of my husband on the nightstand. We made it, Richard, I whispered. That evening, I sat on the dock and watched the ducks swim by. My phone vibrated one last time before I powered it down. A text from Chloe's mother Absolutely disgraceful Chloe is a wreck. I smiled, set the phone aside, and listened to the waves. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like the queen of my own castle. 2 weeks later, I was fully settled. My lakeside garden was starting to bloom, and I'd already met some neighbors' low-key people who valued their privacy. I only checked my phone once a day. One afternoon, an email came from Brandon. No accusations, no demands. Just one sentence. Can we meet just us, without Chloe? I hesitated. My first instinct was to say no. But I thought about the years before Chloe entered the picture. I agreed to meet him at a diner in a nearby town neutral ground. Brandon looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, clothes unpressed. Chloe and her mom are fighting constantly, he began. Now that your money isn't covering the rent and the bills, things have turned ugly. Her mom is calling me a loser because I couldn't manage you into letting us stay. I sipped my coffee. And what do you have to say to that? He looked down. I don't say anything. I'm just now realizing everything you did for us. The full fridge, the clean house, the peace. We just took it all for granted. You did, Brandon. You let her treat me like a stranger in my own home, I said firmly. He was nearly in tears. She wants me to sue you for Dad's inheritance, but I'm not doing it. I can't. I placed my hand on his for a brief moment. That's a smart move. There's nothing to sue for anyway. Everything is in a bulletproof trust. I paid the tab the last time I'd be picking up his check. Get your own place, Brandon. Without Chloe. And definitely without her mother. That's the only way you'll find yourself again. As I drove home, I didn't feel pity, just confirmation. My harshness had been the only medicine that could work. I hadn't lost my son. I just held up a mirror. Whether he liked what he saw was up to him. A year has passed. It's my birthday again. This time, I'm not sitting at a cold table. My terrace overlooking the lake is set for a party. Martha is here along with my new neighbors. And to my surprise, Brandon. He came alone. He's living in a small studio in the city now and working his tail off at a new firm. He and Chloe are officially divorced. There are no flashy gifts or fake compliments. We ate grilled trout and laughed at old stories. Brandon gave me a small amateur painting he'd done of the lake. It wasn't perfect, but it was sincere. Happy birthday, Mom. Thanks for being so stubborn, he said quietly as we toasted. I looked out over the shimmering water. The condo in the city is rented out to a wonderful family, and the income ensures I'll never have to worry about money again. I've learned that family doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. Family means respect, and if that's missing, you have to walk away. Later that night, after the guests had left, I sat on the dock alone. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo I'd posted a year ago. That was the turning point. One simple click that started a landslide. I posted a new photo. The empty table under the stars, my wine glass in the foreground. Caption, peace is the best gift you can give yourself. I didn't feel any bitterness toward Chloe or her mother anymore. They were just extras in a chapter I'd finally finished reading. I breathed in the cool night air. Tomorrow I'll wake up early and take the boat out. My life belongs to me again. I drew my lines, secured my future, and won back my pride. The fire in the hearth was crackling softly. I went inside, locked the door, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly safe. Not because of the walls, but because of the clarity in my soul. My name is Beverly. I'm 66 years old, and I've finally made it home.